How we doing? And welcome back to another episode of Ducks and Bucks, brought to you by the Wild Faith Podcast. Flying solo tonight, but got a couple questions that were sent in by some listeners, so gonna rip through those and try and answer them the best I can. Just got back from hunting some geese in Wisconsin, or eastern Wisconsin. Keep forgetting that I actually live in Wisconsin now. And we did all right. A lot of probably local birds, some early migrators maybe. But hot. Conditions were tough, hot, not a lot of wind, so they were kind of just coming from any certain way. And we did pretty good. We did shoot some geese and got after them a little bit, but it's only going to get better from here on out. And duck already opened up in Minnesota, and it opens up this coming weekend here in Wisconsin as well for South Zone. So Fast and Furious, October and November are going to come flying right by, and I'm ready for them. Also, just kind of found out that I will also now be going to South Dakota this fall. I'm going to be going to North Dakota here in October, and then South Dakota in early November, chasing muleys. Wasn't planning on it. I did draw for archery this year, but with the North Dakota trip and just everything else going on, just figured I'd send my tag back, keep my points, and maybe draw next year for archery in South Dakota. But read the sending back rules wrong, and that's on my bad. So missed the deadline for sending it back, but that's all right. It'll be interesting, but gonna be getting out there this November now. So gonna kind of hit up both Dakotas this fall. So that'll be a ton of fun. See a lot of beautiful God's country out there and chase some animals. So first one up though is the duck side of Ducks and Bucks, and a listener sends this in, and Mike says, in early October, when the first waves of ducks are just starting to push through, what's more important, decoy spread size or concealment? Great question, Mike. Appreciate it. Coming at this from a novice duck hunter, preface with that. October can be pretty tricky, I think, for duck hunting, and just doing a little bit of it myself the last few years out of a canoe and in the marshes. But learning as I go. But you're often dealing with a lot of local birds still. You do kind of got a mix. So, they've been pressured with teal season, with goose season, and so maybe those first small groups of migrators are starting to trickle in. It's been hot this year so far. 85 over the weekend and 80s all this week. So it can be tricky if you're not fighting finicky birds, you're fighting off mosquitoes and heat. So I think the temptation a lot of times is just to go big with a spread, and maybe this isn't just certain or specific to duck hunting, but even early goose hunting maybe a little bit too. 3, 4, 5, 6 dozen decoys, get a ton out there to make it look like this huge impressive spread. But I think the truth is, like, those birds just aren't flying. Like those massive flocks, they're not there yet. You're kind of getting those onesies and twosies, small little groups, maybe a dozen at most. Even this last week in Milwaukee, chasing geese. I think the biggest group we saw was maybe 20 in a flock. And they were way out there, way high, had no business even thinking about coming over by us. But, I think what is going to kill more ducks, what's going to maybe kill more geese this year isn't numbers, but it's realism. So that's kind of probably the second half of Mike's question here, is just that concealment thing. And I think more times than not, I think concealment's probably the most important thing, because if they're coming in and all of a sudden they see you, or there's something off with your hide, whether you're hunting out of an A-frame, layouts, boat blind, whatever that is, I think, at this stage of the game, they're, a little nervous. They're kind of quick and they're sharp. They've been, like I said, those local birds have been pressured, so they've already seen hunters. They're not, some fresh group that's just new to the area and hasn't been shot at yet. So If they pick you out of a blind or see any sort of movement, doesn't matter how big or pretty your spread looks, they're gone, right? So I'd probably run maybe a dozen decoys at most, in a natural kind of family group formation, nothing crazy, but really spend some time brushing in my blind. Just started um, tying a bunch of raffia grass to my blind this evening. With boys, we're kind of helping with that, which was kind of controlled chaos, but it was a lot of fun and monotonous. It's basically like just tying these little knots and just as you go across all um, the little, I don't know what you call them, brush holders on a blind, but on the beaver tail blind. So getting that maybe a quarter of done with it. It's kind of just monotonous, tedious work, um, but that's gonna be the difference is just really getting that blind perfectly concealed. And even with that raffia grass, like that, I don't think is the be all end all. It's a good starter, and then once you get out into the marsh, once you get out into the river or the lake, wherever you're at, that's kind of where I think you can kind of start to maybe trim some local vegetation, and just kind of mix that into your blind a little bit as well to just kind of break it up even better and make it fit a little bit nicer. And the other piece of this too is weather, right? We talked about heat. October weather is usually pretty mild, and they don't have to commit too hard to a feed or a loaf spot yet. So they've got tons of options. A lot of fields are starting to get picked. So if they see something suspicious, odds are they're just gonna probably pop off to the next slough, the next pothole, the next field, whatever that is. So really, that concealment does give you the edge. Um, yeah, that's probably where I would end that one. But super excited to get out here. I don't know if I'll get out for open or a pretty busy weekend, and and honestly, it's gonna be hot. So I think it's gonna be 83 again. So I'm kind of honestly over the bugs. So we'll leave it at that. But moving on to the buck side of the question, this one's coming in from Kenny. Kenny, thanks for sending this one in. Do you hunt bucks aggressively in early October, or is it smarter to wait until later in the month when sign and movement pick up? This is probably one of the biggest debates among bow hunters, and it really just kind of depends on your property, what the camera's just showing you, what all your intel is from years past, that kind of thing. And I think early October kind of gets a bad rep because of what a lot of people will call the October lull, right? And so a lot of guys kind of just hang it up early October until hang it up until late October or even early November, waiting for that rut activity, waiting for some sign to start popping off, waiting for the woods to really just kind of pop off. But the reality is if you got a target buck, patterned is the keyword in daylight, right? And so during that first week of October, that might be the best chance you might get at him. And a lot of it's just going to come down to knowing that buck. You've got history with him. What's he doing? Because a lot, they're creatures of habit a lot of times where you'd be surprised if you really keep a good list and a good database of all your trail camera pictures and start putting kind of the puzzle together on a target buck. Let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a funny name for a deer, but let's just say like crab claw, right? Like if you got this crab claw buck that's constantly showing up early October the last few years, whether he's showing up on that first cold front in October, whether he's just showing up and it's just start trying to figure out those little details, maybe looking at pressure, barometric pressure, that is, looking at weather, looking at moon phase, it's just a whole bunch of things. But the flip side of this, obviously, is if you don't have that good daytime intel from years past, from even current, right? Going in blind and hunting it aggressively in early October can honestly do a lot of harm and good. So it's kind of that double-edged sword where it's, pressuring that mature buck early in the season, walking in with bad access, letting your scent drift into bedding as you're walking in, or just overhunting your best spots, because we're all guilty of it. We all get anxious. Even with, early October, right? We all get anxious with, I just got to get out in the woods, that kind of thing. but that can push a mature buck, especially, into just full nocturnal mode before you even get a chance to hunt him in the rut. The woods are relatively pretty still this time of year. There's not a lot of pressure, right? It's just us bull hunters out there. And if you're on your own piece of private, it's just maybe you or a couple other guys or something. And so, even just like little bit of pressure can really change a buck's routine pretty quick. So I think the answer here is probably twofold, Kenny, and that's hunt aggressively if you've got fresh data and that intel I talked about, and that's trail cameras within the last few days showing daylight activity, maybe some really fresh rub lines, or even just glassing eyes on in an egg field. If you can get, beans are already pretty much turned now, so they're probably coming off of those, but if you can kind of put that pattern together and you can get eyes on him and see where he's coming from, see where he's going, that kind of thing, those are those green lights I think that you need to maybe make that play. But if you don't have any of that yet, just honestly, your best play is to scout. A lot of guys talk about hunting the outside of your property in. So as the season gets better, as the conditions get better, as just the woods gets better, right? We get closer to that rut phase, maybe it's you're gonna sit on this outside of your property on like a field line, knowing full well that there's maybe a 3% chance that you will even have a shot at a deer, but you're gonna be able to see deer coming and going. You're gonna have a lot of eyes. It just eyes on, right? It's just building that intel, learning your woods, learning your property, learning public land, wherever you're doing, and prepare, for those mid to late October timeframes when those bucks are starting to lay down more sign. They're stretching that daylight activity a little bit earlier in the evening, or maybe a little bit later in the morning. And so I think the real truth is that success in early October comes down to discipline, and that's discipline to pull the trigger when the conditions are right, and it's discipline to wait if they're not. So, and I've learned that the hard way plenty of times, where, young and dumb, just blowing into the woods. I'm just gonna hunt because I got the time and whatever. But looking back, it's like, well, you just blew out your whole property, and no wonder all your bucks from early season disappeared. And you're like, well, I had all these giant bucks on my camera all summer in early season, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Well, pressure can be a big factor of that one. And sometimes it's completely unrelated to pressure, but early October is all about just calculated risk, calculated aggression, strike when the time frame and that data lines up, wait when it doesn't. And I think that's the balance that's going to maybe not consistently kill mature bucks in early October, but at least put you in play to have an opportunity for that. So, on that note, a lot of talking on my end tonight. Again, thanks, Mike and Kenny, for sending those 2 questions in. We appreciate it. We got a few more questions lined up, and then we'll have some real obvious specific deer-related questions come mid-October when we launch Chasing the Ruts. So look forward to that. And if you guys got questions, send them in right now. We're happy to answer those the best we can. A lot of times we're learning right along as we're talking here. So appreciate all you guys. Take her easy, and God bless. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this journey through faith in the great outdoors. We hope today's episode has inspired you to seek God's presence in the wilderness and deepen your connection with nature. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the Wild Faith Podcast on your favorite platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll continue to be a part of the Wild Faith Podcast community. We'd also love to hear from our listeners, so please don't hesitate to reach out with your questions, comments, or topic suggestions. You can connect with us on social media or through our website. Your feedback is important to us and helps us improve and tailor our content to better serve you. And always remember, the great outdoors isn't just a playground for hunting and fishing. It's a sanctuary for finding solace and spiritual renewal. As you gear up for that next adventure, I pray you find God's presence in the crackling of a campfire, the thrill of reeling in your catch, or the quiet solitude found in nature. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Wild Faith Podcast. Take care, and God bless.